Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's session, where again, I'm very lucky to have Graham. And Graham and I will be looking at the theme this month of resilience quotient. This is sort of coping with adversity. So without further ado, let me hand over to Graham. Graham, what's this mean to you, resilience and coping with adversity?
Wonderful subject, Jonathan. I'm really looking forward to this because you and I both are men who enjoy extreme challenges of sorts. And I think today we're going to talk about some of those and what we've learned in the process, right?
Yeah.
And these can be physical and mental challenges. So I think resilience is close to our hearts, isn't it? And not something that we think of as necessarily a negative. It's that journey of embracing problems and challenge. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's such an interesting topic. You know, on the one hand, it's really required to succeed in life. On the other hand, you can over-index on it, and there are some consequences. Let's have a look at
we've done that. You and I.
We've
over-indexed. We're on a different index entirely.
That's right. We're sort of driven by some inner demon or some critic on the shoulder going, "You're not good enough. Graham, you're not good enough. Jonathan, you're not good enough. They're going to find you out. You're an imposter.
They are. You're an imposter. That's that dream, isn't it?
You're a loser. Nobody likes you. You're thick." Let's have a look at a couple of questions that we were asked from the audience. A fintech founder and an entrepreneur in Israel, where I'm heading to shortly, was asking me on resilience. What can be the impact on your health and well-being of overdoing resilience? So, Graham, what would you answer to him there?
That's such a good question. We've done this, right? And I think we're victims, not victims, I'm sorry, that's the wrong word. We are, we've experienced our own overdoing our resilience many times. There is a great author, I very much admire John Krakauer, who writes about, he wrote the book Into the Wild, he wrote Into Thin Air, which was about the 1996 Everest disaster. Really well written, very much sort of investigative journalism style writing. And I remember him talking in that he's a mountaineer himself, and it was the year that many people died on Mount Everest. And he said that from the mountain guides, the worst client to take up a mountain was an athlete, because they had, to paraphrase his words, resilience but no agility. Meaning that if you think about an athlete, very, very good, and they dedicated their life to excelling at sticking to the plan quite excessively. And if you're an athlete, you have to do that. You have to sort of never give up, and you have to kind of suck it up and feel the pain, and no pain, no gain. But in sport, that wins you gold medals. But in life, that could be fatal. That could be bankruptcy. It could be the end of a marriage. It could be, all the kind of negative health effects, impact of not being agile. So I think resilience is really important, but you've got to have agility as well. And I know we talk about that. You've got to have one with the other. Resilience without agility is like being a mule. You're stubborn. It's the follow your dreams type, sort of narrative that we all follow blindly, stuck in one mode of doing things. And the result, the flip side of that, agility without resilience is like being a fly. It's like, you're kind of all over the place, but never sticking at anything. So you've got to have both. You've got to have this sort of agility of being able to let go. I think I don't know if you might know this better than me, Jonathan, whether it was Ray Dalio or, I know Jeff Bezos is attributed with saying it, is that you've got to have strong opinions loosely held. You've got to be convicted about what you think, but you've got to be able to take on data and pivot and change. And so therefore, the impact of this, I'm sure we're going to talk about this, the negative mental health impact, financial impact, emotional impact of being resilient without agile is severe. You talked about it last time, Jonathan, like being so intense, and it's just stuck with me. You've just been so intense. That's the resilience overdone, isn't it?
Yeah. I think you just captured it so beautifully. And in a feedback coaching session I was doing recently with somebody, one of the psychometrics looks at the aspect of endurance, your ability to stick at things, see things through. And he was on the 99th percentile, which means that he enjoys, this was about motivation, be enduring and sticking at things more than almost anybody else in the huge norm group in North America. of about 18,000 people taken 2 years ago. And I go, this is great. You know, that you'll see projects through, and he could describe how he'd seen projects through, which took 3 years, and he stuck at it. And I said, what happens when you're wrong? He said, what do you mean? I'm not often wrong. And I said, well, can you think of the last time you were wrong? No, it's a hard one, that. I said, what do you do? Do you admit you're wrong and apologize? No, just keep going. And I said, well, look, that has problems, because you will drive yourself into a situation where people in military terms or in mountains, people die. And I do remember it was very powerful into thin air, and a number of other mountaineering stories I read. I remember when I was at school, Welbeck College in the Army, Ryan was one of the guys there. He went up Ben Nevis with a friend, and they overdid things and didn't give up when they should have turned back. And they slid, poor chap, slid off the edge of a precipice and died. He just all went down. ISAC's arrest didn't happen. And it was just so harrowing for 16-year-old boys to lose a friend of theirs on a mountain because they overdid it. They went too far. So I think the impact on your health and well-being, the question that the FinTech founder is asking about overdoing resilience, is that you will get run down. I've seen many leaders I coach, they get to such a state, they've pushed themselves and they've not had holidays, not had breaks. They've worked, 18 hours out of 24 regularly, weekends, all that kind of stuff. I'm so tough, I'm going for it. And they don't realize it's not a sprint, it's a triathlon. And you don't even know how long the transitions are going to be, and how many times around the pool or across the lake or around the cycle track you're going to go before transition, change again and again and again. And I've seen it, people's immune system get run down. They get, flus, they get COVID again and again. And it's life telling you're overdoing it. So we can talk more about that. But the next question was from an entrepreneur in the UAE. Who I met while on my Hoffman program, and he said, how do you develop greater levels of resilience? What's your on the positive side, Graham, because you've done some phenomenal endurance things, and how have you developed greater levels of physical endurance, resilience, and also mental resilience?
Yeah, this is a really good question, so thanks for that. How do you develop greater levels of resilience? So what actually is resilience? Is it like a strategy? Is it mindset? Is it a skill? I think we kind of need to understand that. Is it a personality trait? Is it a physical trait? There's a great book. I mentioned it before. If you've missed the episodes that we talked about before recommending this book, I'll bring it up now. There's a great book called Rejection-Proof by Jia Jiang, 100 Days of Rejection. It's all about mastering failure. It's really about how you can become more resilient through putting yourself in a situation of controlled failure. Now, when I was a kid, I remember I used to mock my dad because he was a Marine, a Royal Marine. And I know they didn't do it, but it's, you see it on TV, they used to spin the rifles. The American Marines would do it for sure. They had that sort of rifle handling where they spin the rifle. It's all kind of show. And it's like, what's the point of that? And he said it was for handling, right? And he tried to explain it to me. And at the time, as a kid, I wasn't interested. And I'm sure you probably have gone through a lot of this as well. He said that, in combat, you're going to drop your rifle many times, right? Because, it's everything kicks off, you're panicking, et cetera. But if you've constantly mastered that muscle memory of failure, like dropping a rifle, like constantly spinning it, your brain, without thinking, can like grab that rifle, and recovery becomes very easy. So it's like, how do you react to failure? And if you put yourselves in a situation of constant failure, which isn't fatal, spinning a rifle, the next time you drop that rifle out of your hands and, in a combat situation, you ain't gonna like be scrabbling around in the dirt. You're gonna just naturally just put it back into position, right? And so one of the interesting ways of developing resilience is rejection therapy. It exists. You can Google this stuff, right? For example, if you're scared of getting up on stage and talking, a great way of getting through that is developing resilience through podcasting. It's like, you and I do this. And so you're kind of developing a resilience to being out in the public sphere, right? You're sort of embracing rejection. Like, you and I doing this, we're not going to die. we're not going to see our share prices tank on the stock exchange because you said something or I said something, so we're developing that sort of small steps in resilience every single day and mastering it, just as you would a language, right? Every day, put yourself in a situation where you can speak to somebody in a different language and you don't die or fall into the hole in the ground as a result of it. You just master that. So I think the answer to your question, entrepreneur in UAE, is, small steps every day, turn it into a skill of mastery. Master it, like embrace it, like make it part of your personality that you do this thing. And this guy, Jia, who wrote Rejection-Proof, goes through this 100 days of rejection, which is actually a very funny exercise, which I recommend to read or watch the YouTube series. What about yourself?
Yeah.
Jonathan, do you embrace those kind of controlled failures in a way?
Well, very much. And one of the things that I took away on my Hoffman process was that I've been very driven by high performance. You can see, those who can watch the video, you have pictures of my father behind me there, a fast jet pilot, who's somewhat of a hero. And therefore he was on a plinth, and I've been trying to achieve great things like he has, which has made me overcome some amazing challenges. The Cyprus Double Mountain Marathon, it was on day one, and I visualized him there sitting on a cloud having a chat with me, going, come on, son, and it's up to you. If you can walk if you want to, but you'll come third and no one will remember who you are. But if you start running again now with your teammates and get them going following your example, you may win. Everybody remember who won the Cyprus Walkabout. And so those things have been pushing me. And I think what I learned on the process of reflecting on that drive to perform at the highest level again and again, it's fine. It gave me great resilience. What I'm learning now is to be comfortable with imperfection and with failure, and seeing it as a teachable moment. University of Michigan had a great professor who taught me about this idea of, this is a teachable moment. What have you learned? What are you going to do differently? So learning and action. Every time you fail, it's not failure, it's a teachable moment. And if you see this in the way you lead the people who work with you and for you, you won't destroy them and demoralize them and disillusion them, and you'll give them greater resilience. So, okay, what have you learned? Pick yourself up. What have you learned? What are you going to do? So you just take on, but you do need to reflect on the failures. And often many of the people who have the biggest problems never stop to ever consider they were wrong or learn from their failure. They go from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm, as Churchill once described it. Success, moving from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. So you talked earlier, Graham, about making it personal, the definition of resilience. And in our work on inspiring leadership, how we researched and defined it is as follows. This is your ability to successfully cope with disappointment, crisis, and even catastrophe. It's also your ability to recover from your setbacks and to learn from them. As a result of this process, you often become wiser and more resilient than before. This is more than not being fragile or robust. This is about being anti-fragile. There's a whole book about anti-fragile, which is
I like that.
Consequently, your philosophy should be OOMS, OOMS. Obstacles make me stronger. The Stoics' approach is helpful in handling adversity. It's not the events that are a problem, it's your thoughts about the events which are, from the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. So what does that trigger for you, Graham?
Oh, I love that. I was wondering when the Stoics were going to make an appearance in today's episode.
It's all about the Stoics, isn't it?
It is about, at the end of the day, the Stoics really underpin a lot of these conversations. You know what? I was doing a bit of background reading on this, Jonathan. A few things came out which I wanted to share with you, because actually I was looking at it, and guess who came up in my research?
Who?
The Stoics.
The Stoics.
There you go. You can't escape them. Now, it sort of started with that inquiry. I was interested in this idea of resilience, and a line which I've often hackneyed, and it gets used a lot, but it comes from Mike Tyson, is that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, which I think is such a good Yeah, it's actually, I mean, you think about boxing, but it applies to entrepreneurship and it applies to business and life. You know, it's not really about your ability to throw a punch, but, you know, how can you deal with it when things just go really south fast, and they will. And you see that in combat. I'll bring it back to combat. We're coming back to the Stoics in a way. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. I was reading some input and it was very, you know, it wasn't scientific, but they were trying to compare the combat value of a professional soldier over a conscript. And they would argue, for example, that one professional soldier was worth 100 conscripts. I don't know if that was scientific, but you could imagine that, you know, basically you've got a soldier who is resilient because they've been in combat, and then you've got a conscript who's probably a young kid, a teenager or a student who doesn't want to be there, right? And then I was looking at, I don't know if you know, the Battle of Thermopylae. I know you're a historical student yourself, 480 BC, which gave birth to the myth of the 300 Spartans taking on the 120,000 Persians. To what extent those numbers are true has been argued a lot by historians. But the point is that at some point in history, a small group of Spartans took on a very large army of Persians, and they were outnumbered. But the point is the Spartans were, and this is the sort of Stoic background as well, Spartans were resilient. That was their nature. You know, and this may be the overdoing part. They took kids, you know, out of school. Well, you know, in those old days, before they even went into school, they put them into combat, you know, in combat training camps. They slept on stone floors with just like a rag for comfort. And they lived in Spartan upbringing. They had nothing. So, you know, as soon as that Spartan was a teenager, he could go into battle and fight many times, many-fold his own number in the opposition, because he could take the blows. He could take those Tyson punches to the mouth. And I think it's an extreme tale and very apocryphal, but the point has a general truth, which is, you know, resilience isn't a strategy, but it's about an attitude towards embracing hardship and not seeing that hardship as a failure, a problem, but as part of it. You know, you're thrown these hardships as a way to become a better person. And as they say, the way out is through. And I think there's a lot we can learn from combat. Maybe we overdo the analogy, but, you know, as a soldier yourself, I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. And of course, let's choose a topical one like Spare, the book by Harry, where he throws...
Oh, Jonathan...
He throws his family under the bus, doesn't he?
Yes.
And what's interesting is the banter on my WhatsApp group of all the army officers who were in my platoon. And there's various ones which come up. And one is this guy in combat gear, you know, with a flak jacket, looking really muscular, you know, strutting along. And it's Harry, you know, in his days in the army. And it goes... An army officer beaten by a non-combat Royal Air Force officer, disgrace, you know, and this thing about what went on when he was taught this whole thing about resilience and service, and now he's gone completely sort of the woke opposite, and I'm a victim and they beat me up, but I'm making 120 million from the book signing in every country in the world, and I don't want to have my privacy invaded, but I'm happy to do a Netflix series. This contradiction. And so I think resilience, it's interesting in the military. You talked about this combat soldiers. Yeah, we were taught to endure almost unbearable pain and suffering. I think of doing airborne training and climbing up a Bailey bridge and jumping from about 40 foot into a canal yelling airborne as I landed in the water, only to land on the roof of a car that someone had shunted in there.
No way.
About a year before, you know, some stolen car, and almost breaking my ankle, but luckily not. And I thought, this is a bit dangerous. And carrying on when everything in your body just says stop, and you go, oh, gotta keep going. And I remember the corporal instructor, he was going, sir, you're calling me sir politely, but he had no respect for me as a young captain. And he went, "You're a complete loser. Just give up. Just jack it in. Get on the jack wagon." It's like the jack wagon. You just give up.
It's for the losers.
It's for the losers. And you leave the course. Just go. And I go, "No, thank you, Corporal. I'm going to keep going." And he goes, "Tell you what, Jenkins, take your Bergen off. Give it to this officer." And I go, "But Corporal, I've got my own Bergen." He said, "Yeah, I know. Carry his Bergen, because he's not keeping up with the crowd and you are, so carry his Bergen." So I put my arms through and carry his Bergen. I can't even run at this stage. I am absolutely weighed down by two very heavy army Bergens. And Jenkins is running off. He's joined the group and there's me at the back. And this corporal's just constantly going at me, psychologically running me down, gaslighting me, just telling me I'm a complete loser. And he goes, "Just give up." I said, "Thank you, Corporal. I'm going to keep going." And eventually he got really irritated. "Oh, for God's sake, Jenkins, come back, take your Bergen, carry on." But I was shattered. And and this idea of resilience, you have to close down. You almost put a mask on.
Yeah.
And you push through any kind of emotions, any feelings, to just do it. But the problem is you become an automaton.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was discussing with a lady who's a behaviorist, and she's very interesting, going to be on a future podcast. She deals with a lot of the ex-military and the veterans and people who've been through 9/11 and school shootings in Texas and stuff like this. And she said the military are great in training people up to become this automaton that can handle their rifle, dash down, crawl, observe sights, fire. You don't think about it; you just do it. So you train that person up to be this machine and resilient in horrendous situations where people are dying all around you. But then when you finish your service, they don't deprogram you and prepare you to come into civilian life. So this is why we find far too many veterans around the world, but particularly if we picked America and the UK, on the streets, there's a huge number of ex-veterans because they've still got the mental problems of closing down all their feelings and emotions. Therefore, their relationships fall apart. They look PTSD, for comfort. They have PTSD. They look for comfort from alcohol or drugs or some way out. And even, some people like me become workaholics and just work too hard. So there is something we've really got to watch with that total focus on resilience.
It's a toxic resilience, isn't it? It's like an old-fashioned resilience. It's, to the extreme, like you mentioned in those scenarios, like it works in an extreme environment. But in many cases, life isn't like that. You're not in a combat situation. We can learn a lot from it, but we have to take away the best part of that.
Yeah.
We have to kind of learn what is real resilience. And it is that ability to, I think the poker face part is important to be able to compartmentalize your emotions and just be able to deal with stuff right in front of you. But I think, the big part about resilience that probably is the most effective is the being able to chunk down the task. When you're facing a really tough situation, and that may be a business, like if you're a startup founder, it may be a personal situation, it may be a financial situation. I think that there's a key lesson learned in resilience here is that there is actually strategies for it. When I did the Ironman triathlon, for example.
Yeah, tell us about that. I mean, Ironman, just for those listening who don't know, how far is the swim, the run, and the bike? What are we talking about?
I'll do it in kilometers. So it's 3.8K open water swim. So it's in the sea. So 4,000 meters. What is that? 2.5 miles.
That's far. That's a long way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that in the sea alone is a killer. That's an hour and something. And then you're out and you're doing 180K bike, which is 6 hours.
180 kilometers.
Yeah. On the bike, and you've got to take all your food with you as well, so you've got to think about that. And you've already done the swim, so you're out on the on the bike, and then you finish off with a marathon.
26
and
what's that?
42K 42K. Yeah. So it's like in its entirety, it's quite mind-boggling unless you're like in the scene, and it becomes a lot more sort of manageable. But it's let's say it's 12 hours for most people. And if you sort of break it down, I think, the resilience part is there's like your corporal, there's many, many times when you've got this voice that says, give up, give up, give up, just sit down. Okay, well, maybe this year's not your year. Maybe like, blah, 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 maybe like, all these kind of excuses. And the way that I got through it was two things. Firstly, I broke down every single part of it. So with the bike, the 6 hours, I broke down every single hour and where I wanted to be at that point. I wanted to be here and this distance, there, here and this distance. So, and I think I learned this from mountaineering and Joe Simpson, who did Touching the Void, the book about those two mountaineers that went up in South America. And he said that, when he came down the mountain and he was struggling for his survival, he just said, get to that next rock, get to that. And once you've done that rock, get to the next rock. And for me, it was like that. Even when I got to the point, I didn't think there was a marathon to run after, 8 hours of effort. When I got there, think about that when you get there. So when I got off the bike to do the marathon, I didn't think of it as 42K, which itself is it's a marathon. I thought, actually, just break this down. I broke it down into one 20K and then two 10Ks and then a 2K. So I said, I'll do the 20K and then I'll think about the 10K. And I did the 10K. I've just got one more 10K. And when I did the 10K, it's only 2K to the home shoot now. So that's that chunking. A lot of survivalists talk about chunking because what it allows you to do is it allows you just to focus on the task at hand, not to get overwhelmed by the bigger challenge. And then you also have that sort of psychological positive reinforcement when you complete each task as well. So there is a skill side to resilience, which I think I've learned through endurance sport, but there are many analogies elsewhere as well. And you can certainly see it in business if you're going through a hard patch. Just get to this next point and then, then take a call on what you're going to do next.
Gosh, I really respect anybody who's done the Ironman. You've done a few things. I'll hear about a few more in a minute, but to do that kind of distance and swimming in the sea anyway is tough. But I do think, again, back to the airborne selection to get my parachute wings and my sort of maroon beret, that the instructor, we'd just done a 10-mile march, running, walking fast with our heavy Bergens, our helmets and our weapons, speed marching and running. And as we came into the gate, we had the finish ahead of us. We knew it was there. But in war, situations never kind of work out. I mean, look at Ukraine and Russia. The Russians thought they're going to be in Kiev, and they had their ceremonial uniforms hanging up inside their tanks, ready to do a ceremonial parade with Putin the next day. Never kind of worked out like that. Life is never like that. The enemy don't go, oh, do you know what? You're tired. I tell you what, we won't attack today. Have a break. Let us know when you're rested, and we'll come back. And it's the same in business. The rival businesses don't go, oh yeah, you're having a bit of a bad time. Cash flow's a problem. Let me lend you some money. They don't. And so I learned this lesson very quickly on the airborne training, because we came in the end of the 10-miler and I just prepared myself for getting to the end. We're then going to have a hot shower and then we were going to do something different in the afternoon. And we get to within 100 meters of the front gate to finish, and you could see the parade ground where we'd be stood down and go and have a showers. And the instructor goes, right, turn around. We're going to go back and do it again.
No.
And sure enough, we turned around and off we went. Well, of the 80 of us on the selection, by that stage, 10 dropped out. They got on the jack wagon. They went, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. I couldn't mentally prepare for that.
Yeah. They just got to dig deep, haven't they?
Got to dig deep. And luckily I found the energy. I was almost devastated, but I just carried on. And actually, he only took us a mile. And then he said, okay, that's good enough. Let's go back in. But he did the same again, like 2 days later. We were coming up a hill called Heartbreak Hill. We got to the top of it. And he goes, you hungry lads? You think you have nice breakfast? We haven't had breakfast yet. We go, yes, staff. And over the crest of the hill were chefs with white aprons and hats, bacon, beans, sausages, fried eggs. And we came towards the tables, and the idiot, the psychopath, kicked the tables over, beans and food everywhere. Said, you're not going to have any of that. The enemy are about to attack. Keep going. And I thought,
oh boy.
And of course, men and food when they're hungry and tired. But his point was, it's sometimes in life,
it's real.
You've got to have that resilience.
Wow.
And I want to just turn the question to you now. What about the unfairly named snowflake generation? Would they keep going past the spilt beans? Or would they cry?
Let's put them to the test, shall we? Yeah. Let's get the snow. I think it's rather unfair to name them that. Of course, yeah. I mean, the media plays a lot to do with it. I mean, look, these generations haven't grown up with the adversity that previous generations have faced. It's not particularly our generation. I think we were probably lucky, but our parents' generation and their parents' generation had adversity. We at most knew recession, but not like their, the grandparents' generation in maybe the 30s. So, adversity creates resilience. It creates that hardened ability to deal with things, right? And if you haven't had that, you wouldn't want your children to suffer just so they could learn that lesson, right? You wouldn't want to enforce poverty on them such that they understood the value of money and hard work. Nobody wants that. The reason that you work to become successful is such that your children don't have to face poverty. So to call children a snowflake really, I think, is sort of the product of our generation's success, if you like. That's testament to us. We didn't throw it all away such that they grew up in recession and poverty such that they could be hardened to this stuff, right? So that's us. That's what we've done for them, right? That's a little bit unfair, but I think there is sort of.
Go on.
Do you want to? I was going to say, I just think there's definitely things we can do to help them become resilient, which is like, not necessarily enforce poverty, but maybe help them with attachment. That's the agility part, like, attachment to things and materialism, which creates that kind of fragility, right?
Yeah.
That this is my expectations of what I should have in my life, right? And I think you and I probably do a good job, or we try each day to do a better job of helping our children, even in their adult life, realize that, right? Privilege.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting one. It's about mindset and mental attitude to something, so that kind parents want to give positive love, unconditional love, support a child. I mean, we're looking after our son and his wife and a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old for the next 6 months while they're moving home. And Lee, my wife, was doing all she could to prepare our daughter-in-law for a job interview. She went to one of the schools that she's gone. She's waiting to hear what the result is. So that she wants to be a special needs assistant and help out, so she can get some money in to look after the children and stuff, and help her husband, who's a police officer. And the money doesn't go very far these days, even for a good old police officer doing a job to keep the country safe. But the reason I mention that is that we try and help our children to have a good start, to launch them, to give them the best. But at times, our good intentions can backfire, because we don't have boundaries, and we try and save them from themselves and from hardship, and we protect them and put them in cotton. We don't want them to have bad life experiences. But you know what? Bad shit's going to happen to them. And are you doing them a favor by trying to protect them from everything? I don't think so. But at the same time, you don't want to drop them right in it. So it's this idea of attachment, non-attachment, non-judgment, but at the same time, a mental attitude, a resilient attitude to cope with setbacks and adversity along the lines of, okay, it hasn't worked out as you hope, you didn't get the job. What have you learned? What are you going to do differently? How are you going to pick yourself up? Let's learn from this, but let's not have a pity party. Poor you, victim, because making someone the victim and you the rescuer creates a problem in itself. But go, look, I see you having agency, this ability to solve your own problems. What, between a stimulus and response, as Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, between stimulus and response, you have choice. And I think that's the key to people being resilient mentally and physically. You are at choice. It's no one else. You can choose. The only thing you can control is your thoughts and your own actions, not mine, not anybody else. How are you going to think about this? And what are you going to do now? So I don't know what your thoughts are, and then we can have
I agree.
talk about leaders, different leaders we've known.
Oh yeah, different leaders we've known. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because leadership really core to that is resilience, isn't it? Because it's not a popularity contest, is it? Being a leader, well, especially a good leader. Not necessarily the leaders we want, but the leaders we get and we need sometimes are the ones that are willing to, follow the path of most resistance. And therefore they need a lot of resilience. A good leader should be able to absorb being unpopular for a greater good. So are we going to give the rundown to the list that we have?
Yeah.
Are we? Do you want to go there?
Yeah. So Graham, yours were Robert F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Greta Thunberg, Honda, Rosa Parks, Bill Gates, Tim Cook, Steve Jobs, those kind of people. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, the obvious one that we've mentioned before is Ernest Shackleton, isn't it? It's a very sort of boys' own type story, isn't it, about resilience? But gosh, what a story! And they made it out alive. Some of them, not all of them. The dogs certainly didn't. But that was just a harrowing story, isn't it? It's just extreme resilience. Maybe that's sort of extreme and unnecessarily, extreme. But that's a great lesson. I don't know to what extent it's a lesson in leadership, because maybe they were just surviving. Well, I don't know. You've looked at it. I've looked at it. You've read the stories. I don't know if is it leadership or they're just surviving.
That's a good challenge, actually. But the book I read was, his ship was called Endurance, and the book I read was Endurance. And I do think he led them well, and he prepared them long before they hit hardship for what are we going to do if things don't kind of work out. And the choice of people who were resilient and who were team players, because coping with resilience and adversity is not a solo game. I know you and I have been solo players in our extreme activities we've done, mountain marathons and Ironmans. But it's actually there's almost a mental group of supporters with you in your mind, of people who gave you role models, like my father. In my case, my mother was really strong, coping at the age of 33, being widowed, and her hopes and aspirations dashed, but having 3 young boys, 9, 7 and 2.5. And she showed great resilience. And I think this preparing yourself for, you'll have some highs and you'll have some lows. And as Rudyard Kipling said in his poem, If, you'll treat those 2 imposters just the same, the successes and the failures. And I think to not have this expectation that life's got to be fair, because life isn't fair. And if things don't work out, just like shit happens, get over it. What are you going to do now? But I think it is important that you're in touch with your feelings and your emotions, so you don't become a hard-ass bastard who others can't live with, your partners and your children. I've come across many people who's suffered because their father, often mother sometimes, was so hard and so resilient. They had no ability to empathize or give love. They cope with negative love. And that's a problem, which spills out.
That's half of the story, isn't it? That's taking, you need resilience and agility. That's resilience without agility. Those people, it's like a coping mechanism. They develop this sort of, they anneal themselves to problems, which is create this armor which you need to deflect, but you need this agility to be able to deal with it. And at the human level, that's emotion, isn't it? To be able to emotionally read what's necessary. And those people that just become resilient without agility, you and I have done that. And we're surrounded by role models of people who did that, and are on a plinth, like you say, of people who are seen as masculine role models. And they are resilient without agility. So there's a lot of leaders, I'd say, that are kind of cast in that light, and we're seeing it. So that's a great example of a tough man.
Yes.
And we're kind of learning the other half of it now, aren't we?
Correct. And I think when we look at, let's say, Queen Elizabeth II, the late Queen Elizabeth II, she, I think, to me, coped with a lot of adversity She was in her early 20s when she became the queen. Her father died of a long illness with lung cancer and stuff like that, which he was taken before his time. And she had many setbacks and things. You could say she lived a life of privilege. I think she did. But at the same time, things didn't kind of work out. Her annus horribilis, as she described it, things didn't kind of work out as she had hoped. And 3 of her children getting divorced and stuff like that. And it was all in the public eye. And I think how people cope with setbacks and disappointments. I mean, General Lord Danner, who was episode 200, was a great role model to me of someone who coped with adversity, setbacks. He was, his sergeant and his radio operator were shot either side of him from behind by the IRA while he was engaging with the IRA from the front, from behind a vehicle. Then on his way home from one of the exercises a few years later, exhausted, he fell asleep and almost went into one of those old tank ditches, which are about 10 foot deep and about 5 foot wide to stop a Soviet tank. And luckily, when he drove off the motorway asleep, he just happened to catch a small 2-meter piece of the bridge where there was a farmer's bridge. And he just happened to drive off and awoke in a field.
No way.
Yeah, I mean, if it had been 2 seconds earlier, 2 seconds later, he'd be dead. He wouldn't be with us now.
Crazy.
And then he had a stroke. As quite a young man working for my old boss, Field Marshal Inge, as his adjutant, collapsed while washing his hands in the gents' toilets, while the rest of them were on parade. They go, "Where's the adjutant?" And they go, "Don't know. Where is it?" They went back, looked in his office, couldn't find it. Someone called out, no sound. They went into the gents, and there he was, sprawled out. He'd had a stroke, and could have died, but actually lived. But even to this day, he still, one side of his body goes at times when he's under stress, has a problem. So that's just a few examples of things that he's coped with, as well as becoming head of the army and stuff like that. And I just find, but he has a human side to him as well. And that's what I think good, resilient leaders are in adversity. They have humanity, humility, and a nice bit of humor. The 3 hums, as my friend Roger Steer would call them. But I think that's important. You don't want someone who's just a machine that no one can really relate to, an automaton. I mean, one of the books that we're going to mention, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins.
I was just thinking about him as you were talking.
Master Your Mind and Defy the Odds by David Goggins. I mean, 2 times he did SEAL training, Hell Week. He was running along with sort of feces running down the inside of his legs and blood everywhere, and kept running on. I mean, that's extreme. And there's almost like you think, what's wrong? Why are people doing that? That's really way.
He's almost like on the spectrum, I think, with that.
I think with that level of it,
it's not kind of, you can't. That's way out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty amazing what he's done.
Yeah,
and his the kind of things that you and I think are a real endurance challenge for him are just, it's like a park run, right?
Yeah, I mean, phenomenal endurance, but almost to an extreme.
Yeah.
And then what about inspiring organizations, Graham? What have you thought about with inspiring organizations?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess we've got to look at organizations that have evolved and have reinvented themselves. Not that I'm a massive fan of them, but I've got to respect Satya Nadella, who's the CEO of Microsoft, and what they've done. That Microsoft should have disappeared many years ago, but they've kind of reinvented themselves, been resilient. So I think that, on the business side, props to them, still around, still going. And like, if you look at the shareholder returns, better than ever. In the face of people like Apple and Google competition and so on, right? So, I mean, they're doing something right. And Satya Nadella is resilient. He is emotionally intelligent, very different from the previous generation of leaders like Steve Ballmer. So I think that's an interesting one to kind of dig into, because it's not the most exciting as an organization.
Stay with Microsoft, because it was interesting in that time of Steve Ballmer. A few of the fintechs I've come across recently, quite a number of the talented ones had been in Microsoft and gone on to do their own startups. But they said it went toxic during the time of Steve Ballmer.
Yeah.
And it became a place they didn't want to be in anymore. So there was that push to achieve and goals and stuff. but at what cost? As someone once said to me with resilience, you could probably achieve pretty much anything you set your heart on if you're, one, prepared to pay the price, and two, live with the consequences. But you've got to ask yourself, is the price and are the consequences worth it? What do you think?
Well, that's it. I mean, we talk about this, we're going way back to the original question from your listener who was talking about overdoing resilience. And this is interesting, isn't it? Because it really, to just be resilient without understanding the cost of being resilient is actually a bit of a cop-out, I think. It's like an easy way out. All you're doing is just effectively, you're closing down everything.
Yeah.
So it's not an effective solution. Like, you could think, I give you examples of, I can list hundreds of people I've known as startup entrepreneurs who've started a business. Oh, follow your passion. So they started a business, they've launched a business, they've gone for it, and they've ended up just failing. Like, they've tried everything. They, the money didn't make enough money, couldn't make it work, run out of cash, blah, blah, blah. Such a common startup story, right? We only hear about the survivors, obviously. But that's a good example of people who just weren't agile enough. They didn't listen. They didn't take in advice. They didn't understand the cost of doing this. I'm not saying don't be a startup entrepreneur. I am. And I absolutely love it as a lifestyle and would recommend it to the right person. But, it's the right person. And that's the point, is not everybody can do it. Not everybody can make it work. And just following your passion is not enough. You've got to be able to pivot. You've got to be able to constantly read the market data, listen to what people want, and be able to change on that, which is the emotional intelligence, the agility, right? And so that's it. If you just go at it, I mean, we hear so many stories of people who just go at it and they get lucky and they get successful, like Facebook or Google. But this is survivor bias. We don't hear about the hundreds of thousands of people who did exactly the same and followed their dreams and followed their passions and got nowhere and ran out of money. And because they weren't agile.
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting point you make about the survivor bias and the books that are written by the people who did make it, just like history is written by the people who win.
Yeah, the victor.
The one who got defeated, no one hears from them.
Right.
Or rarely do you hear from them. And I think you raise a really good point about the danger of closing down everything for this single-minded obsession. But there are consequences to it. But there's some grains of success. Like, I just really enjoyed listening to an audiobook written, I think it might have been recommended by you, Graham. I can't remember, called Essentialism.
Okay, Greg McKeown.
Yeah, by Doug McKeown. And it was really interesting to me, this idea of being focused on what you are good at. So as you say, people follow your passion, that kind of thing. But find something that you are good at, that you have a talent for, that the market needs and that they'll pay for. That ikigai kind of 4 elements of it, which you being over in Singapore would be a big fan of. And I do like this. But with that, you have to say no to a lot of things in order to say yes to what really matters. And to admit that you're wrong. And like going down a ravine where there's no way out, and being pig-headed about it, it's like, you've got to learn when you're wrong and accept that you've made a mistake. Quickly own up to it and do something about it, because people sometimes go so far down it, there's just no way out.
That's climbing the mountain, Jonathan. That's why athletes die going up Everest. It's because they're 100 meters away from, 27,000. Sorry, switching my metrics here. So 27,000 feet, 700 feet or whatever it is, and 100 off the top, and they refuse to go back down. But a guide will tell them to go down. They'll say, look, you can do this next year. But those people who are so pig-headed, like the athletic mindset that they've been trained with all life, maybe even the military mindset as well, you can get through this. I don't know, maybe they probably got a little bit more ability to read the situation.
Well, you go.
I was just saying, if you've grown up being trained just to do one thing and stick at it and never give up, you're going to die.
Yeah. Yeah, and you raise an interesting point. There's an amazing mountain guide called Isabelle Santois, and in Lee's book, Inspiring Women Leaders, she interviewed Isabelle. She was like one of 3 women among a whole group of worldwide mountain guides who are all blokes. And I mean, her Bergen was bigger than her. She was a tiny little lady, but really determined. And, you know, all these tests they had to do to become qualified. Eventually, you know, on 3rd attempt, she got in. And yeah, it was exactly a case in point. She was on one of the famous mountains with her paying guide, and they were about an hour from the summit. And she said, the weather's turning. It's going to get really bad. I've been following the forecast. We must turn back. He said, but this is my 3rd attempt, and I'm paying you to take me to the summit. She said, no, you're paying me to keep you alive. And if we can get to the summit and back, fine. I am not going to kill you and myself in the process of your obsession, what they call goal obsession. This resilience obsession about, you know, goal at all cost, shit or bust. And she said, we're turning back. So they turned back and they went down, and they met another group coming up without a guide. I don't quite know why they had no guide. And they said, we're going for the summit. She said, you must turn back. I'm stopping you now. You must turn back. The weather's turning. If you carry on, you will die. No, we're going on. And and she was almost fighting with them, but they struggled past her and pushed on. They died because they were so goal obsessed. That was the time they should have turned round, you know, like in Everest. People forget it's only half the journey getting to the summit. The other half is coming back down again. And people think, when I'm at the summit, I've done it. I've got my goal. Yeah. No, you're halfway there.
That's tough, though. If you've been trained to do and think like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I love all these mountaineering stories. And there was one thing I wanted to share with the listeners about resilience. And I wanted to share this with you as well, Jonathan. It's like, I was looking at where the word came from, because I'm a bit of an etymological geek. And interestingly, like if you break down the word resilience, it like obviously to do again. And the last part, salire, is Latin. It means to jump out or to jump back. And it's why we say in English, salient points. It's like a jumping out point, you know, what sort of jump spikes, right? So the word resilience means to kind of jump back, bounce back, right? And it's interesting that whilst it's been around for a long time, it's never really been used in scholarly literature, except the earliest one that I could find, and I'd be interested to hear your listeners on this, is that the earliest record I could find of it was 200 years ago by an author called Treadgold, very obscure. And he was talking about resilience in the property of timber, wood. Wow. And he was explaining why some types of wood were really good. You know, they could bear a load, they could accommodate flexibility. Bamboo, very resilient, right? Flexible, great for building, great for scaffolding, right? And I thought about the idea of wood, because the reason why I brought this up is because you were talking about that sort of, you know, automaton. Like you can build a house out of concrete or metal, right? But it's very inhuman. You know, concrete and metal are strong, but wood is not only beautiful and soft, it's a perfect building material. Yeah, I know it rots and you have to change it. It can, you know, get eaten by termites and stuff, but it's strong, adaptive, and flexible. And it has all those kind of human qualities, you know, wood, like a wood table versus a metal table, you know, it's like, I can see, like, even in your room, if you see the video, folks, look at all the wood behind Jonathan. It's very human. You want to be there. You know, if that was all metal paneling, it would feel industrial and cold. Right. And you can think about the heat properties of wood versus metal as well. So, and I think like that idea of being like wood is wood grows, wood evolves, you know, wood's not perfect, but it's fantastic even in this day and age to building houses. We build a lot of the interiors and the structure out of wood, right? And you know, thousands of years we've been using it as material to build because of that flexibility and that dynamic nature of wood. And I'm thinking about that, you know, it is the perfect, you know, resilient material, you know, because a tree can survive a storm, you know, and it's built for it.
I love that. And it also is making the connection with nature and how things flow in nature. And there are days when there's storms and there's days when there's peace and calm and quiet and sunshine. And it's a bit like that with us mentally and physically, with our resilience to adversity. If we faced adversity every day, all our lives, it would break us.
Yeah.
And we do need these downtime. This is why, I have my power nap before I come on this call, round about midday, 30 minutes power nap. It's great because the fact we've now got our grandchildren living with us, we were up at 3:30 till 4:30 and then working again at 6 and then, up at 7. And it would tend to affect your ability to perform. And so I think the thing about your Ironman training and my double mountain marathon, the Cyprus double mountain marathon, my airborne training, is you've trained for it, but you must build in recovery and rest, just like any athlete.
Yeah.
They're now into zone 2 training. When I'm on my rower once a week, I do 50 to 55 minutes of rowing at a zone 2 of my heart, which is not too hard, but it's 10 kilometers and just steady training so that then you can push hard. But if athletes train at full on all the time, they will break themselves, they will injure themselves. And this is the same in business, that particularly those coping with the pandemic, people thought, oh, well, I'll push myself really hard for 6 months, we'll be fine. But it lasted 2 years, maybe in some ways 2.5 years. And it was a bit like our tours, our back-to-back tours with the Army. You did 6 months on operations, then you came back for 6 months and you had an easier time to train up, recover some injuries. People could get help at Headley Court if they'd had any shrapnel injuries or whatever it might be. And it might take them some years to get back in, or a new life out of the Army, whatever it might be. But you couldn't carry on sprinting all the time when it's actually an Ironman with transitions.
Yeah, that's it. That's a bit of wisdom, though, isn't it? Marathon, not sprint. Life.
Yeah. And I take it even further to the triathlon, because I like the triathlon bit, because you've got the first bit, which is your swim.
Yeah.
Then you have a transition, and life is full of transitions, and you don't know quite when you're going to come out of how many laps or how far it is. You're not quite sure in life when it's going to be right. Transition now, Graham. Oh, okay, right. And you're trying to get transition and adjust to something different. Moving from somewhere to live in Singapore or whatever it might be, and then transition again. Oh, wasn't expecting that. And then of course you go around the site. You think, I'm finish line, and you go, no, back, do another mile.
You got a marathon to do, guys.
Come on, do it again. Oh, I'm giving up. I'm getting the jack wagon.
I want that with the guy, the chef, the baked beans, the bacon, all there. And then just as you hit the finishing shoot, you're like,
trying to eat the beans off the floor. So let's have a look before we wrap up with some of our books and what we recommend to people if they love listening to audiobooks or reading books. Here's a few, and Graham, if you can just make any comments on any of them that you come across. Discipline is Destiny, The Power of Self-Control by Ryan Holiday. I enjoyed that one. The Stoics.
Yeah.
The Resilience Project, really nice guy called Hugh van Cuylenburg, who did say he was going to come on the podcast, but then he's so popular and so busy now. He said, look, I've said no to all podcasts, which is a great shame because I love his book.
Well, you did say in this podcast, say no.
Yeah.
So he is actually living
He's allowed to. I was a bit disappointed, but then again, I thought, well, actually, good on you. I respect you for doing that. His book is called Finding Happiness Through Gratitude, Empathy, and Mindfulness. And it's a great read.
Resilience Project.
The Resilience Project by Hugh van Cuylenburg, Cuylenberg.
Nice. Okay.
One of the other guests I had on the program, Dan Jarvis, MP, MBE. Dan wrote a book called Long Way Home, Love, Death, and Everything in Between, with his time in the Paras and Special Forces, and then becoming a Labour Member of Parliament. Fascinating book.
That's right. He's a nice guy.
Oh, so nice, and I'd be happy if he was one of our ruling members of Parliament.
He's a real Yorkshire lad, isn't he?
I'm not quite sure where he's from. Yeah, I couldn't quite remember where he's from, but yeah. Then one that you and I have talked about, Nimsdai Purja, Beyond Possible.
Ah, yes.
The man of the mindset who summited K2 in the winter.
Those guys are legends. I follow him on Instagram. They are that the whole story about them going up K2,
Yeah.
you know, when they were hungover, I think, as
Yeah.
well, which is
He'd
just
been
incredible.
partying. No, just.
Well, what an inspiring story. Watch the Netflix documentary as well. It's
Yes,
just
I watched
incredible.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
Nimsdai Persia,
What a good recommendation.
MIMSDAI. Yeah, and just awesome resilience. And then we talked about endurance. Shackleton's Incredible Journey by Alfred Lansing, a guy who's a real favorite of mine, Admiral William H. McRaven. And he does that little clip on YouTube, which is probably one of the most popular ones. First, make your bed. And one of his books is called Sea Stories: My Life and Special Operations. And then we talked about David Goggins, Can't Hurt Me.
I've got the book. I bought the book for my son, the Now First Make Your Bed book, which is like a handbook. It's like, I don't know, it's only about 50 pages long, I think.
Yeah, no, it's really great. Such good.
David Goggins, yeah.
Blimey. So before we wrap up, Graham, and I just mentioned next month, anything else that you'd like to add about books or resilience?
No, I think those are great recommendations. I've made a note of some of those, and I will check them out and make some orders on Amazon. I'll read the blurbs and see what works for me. But I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think that, you know, these conversations are really revealing for us. We've kind of had a set of beliefs, haven't we, that we grew up with that kind of work for us. But at some point in our life, we've had a reckoning, haven't we?
Yeah.
And a realization. It's kind of, that is part of it in the resilience part, because resilience was core to that, wasn't it? That sort of a whole very toxic man up attitude towards things. Resilience without agility. And you and I have both been in environments which have rewarded it up to a point, entrepreneurship to an extent, military, and then, you know, even in our own endeavors in endurance sports and so on. So we've kind of like applied this, but we've had to kind of evolve and like challenge our own ways of thinking. So hopefully for the listeners as well, you know, some of the things we brought up today may have people thinking. We'd love to hear feedback as well. You know, what people have experienced in resilience and the questions that they may have about it, and even recommendations about books. We're always open to that, aren't we?
Yeah, no, please get in touch, you know, jonathanperks.com, my website, and grahamspickhole.com. Because any questions you might want to ask for next month, which we're doing BQ, brand quotient, your brand image, impact, and reputation, what people say about you when you're not in the room, which would be very interesting. So, Graham, thank you. My appreciation of you, my friend. You've just achieved some phenomenal things, some physical endurance and personal endurance as an entrepreneur and as a podcast agency host. And one of the top podcasters, I think, in the world. So thank you. That's my appreciation of you. I find you inspiring and uplifting.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. So what can I add to what I've already said about you in the previous episodes in terms of appreciation? But it's just the fact you've created this thing, this podcast, and all the amazing people that you've had. And I'm very privileged to be amongst them and your guests. You know, just going back and having a look at some of the stories that they've told, like you've shared a few today as well. I just really appreciate that you've just kind of given a voice to these people. And it's not just interviews as well. It's core to your story as well. And there's that real sort of vulnerability in what you've shared. You know, you're not this sort of hardened military man. Yeah, you have that part to you, but that's just half the story. There's this sort of, you know, this awakening as well. And I think the podcast and the conversations that you have are really an extension of that. And I really do appreciate that, because to me, that's a really good use of all of this. You know, it's not just like, let's have some conversations. It's really about, you know, you're really passionate about this subject because it's a deep curiosity of your own. And so everybody that you bring on, you're kind of like exploring different rabbit holes in that subject. And it's just been so fascinating to watch your journey, Jonathan, on this podcast and your newsletter as well. I did reread your newsletter as well today. So, you know, I do recommend people to sign up for that, because you do give away extra stuff on that as well. So yeah, all of the above.
Thank you. Well, Graham, you're a good friend and a good muse and someone I can bounce ideas from. And if people do want to get the newsletter, which gives you details of the podcast guests, book reviews, things like that, it's a short one. Just go to my website and sign up for it. And also you can get information on, I think on there's something on resilience, and there's also something on health and well-being, which is a free download of some top tips to help yourself fill your boots. Anyway, Graham, thank you once again, and I look forward to next month. Brand, reputation, image, and impact. Lovely listening to you all and sharing thoughts. Bye for now.